Welcome to The Home and the Maker, sharing advice and encouragement about all topics homemaking and homesteading, and honoring the maker in all of it. Join Megan from Shine.fm for today's conversation.
Colossians 3:17 says, "And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." That even means that something like making bread can be done for the glory of God. And that's exactly what Alexis is doing through the mission of her micro bakery, which is called Need for Christ Baking Co. out of Franklin, Indiana. And Alexis has joined me on the podcast today to share all about sourdough and honoring God through her work. So thanks for joining me today, Alexis.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, tell me about how you got started doing this sourdough micro bakery. Why did you start to work with sourdough?
So I currently have two children. My first is 4.5, and I was working from home with him until he was about 2.5 years old. And I was a recruiter, and it was really hard to manage like talking on the phone, while also taking a 2.5-year-old potty. So I was really struggling with, do I leave my job, or do I keep with my job and try to put him in daycare? And I always felt this calling that daycare was just not an option for our family. And so I got into a really bad postpartum depression with him, and sourdough was just up and coming and just starting. And I thought, well, I kind of want to try it. So for my birthday in February, when my son was 2.5, my mother-in-law had given me instructions on how to start a sourdough starter. And I went all in. I mean, she's like the mother I always needed. She's always calling me to check in on me, make sure I'm okay. And so I just dove right in. I started searching everything I could about sourdough. I wanted to know all about how it worked, the process. And so then I started feeding my starter. And about 2 months later, I made my first loaf of bread. And it was not very good. I mean, it was dense, it was flat. And I was so excited about it. And I was like, I'm just going to keep trying. And so, when you have your hands in the dough, it's really sticky and messy, and you have to really pay attention to like how much flour and how much water you're using. So I started like mixing my dough after my son went to bed, and I used that time as my time with God. So I would put in a podcast, or I'd turn on like audio Bible, and I would just listen. And I realized that was God pulling me closer to him and pulling me out of the depression I was in.
Wow.
So after, a few more mess ups, I got my first loaf perfect. And
Yay.
I was so excited about it. And then I couldn't stop making bread. I made bread every single night. And then I started increasing how many I was making to where basically it looked like a tornado of flour went off in my kitchen. And I started gifting bread to my neighbors, to friends, to family, to members of our church. And I looked at my husband and I said, I can't do both. I can't be a baker and work for this corporation at the same time. And after work, I was praying, and I just felt God tell me, quit your job, just quit. And I was so scared, because that's financial stability. And unfortunately, that's something we need. But I felt God pushing me so hard to just quit. And I had only been doing sourdough for 2 or 3 months at this point. I hadn't run into any of the, any hard positions that I had been in or things that I've overcome since then. I had never experienced that except my first bad loaves that I had. And so I was thinking, and I was like, well, I needed Christ at that moment when I started dough. So then I made it need for Christ, but made the need like you're needing bread. So that's how the name came about. Was I was just praying about it, and I thought how badly I needed Jesus to save me from my depression that I was in after having my son. And I called my boss and I said, I'm putting in my notice. She said, well, we don't take a notice. And I just started baking bread. And I went downtown Franklin, and spoke to some local businesses, and this local business said that she would love to have me sell on her back patio at her business. So about, I think it was 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago today, that I had my very first market at the Strawberry Festival downtown Franklin, and I sold out within 4 hours.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it grew really, really fast. And my husband told me that it's not normal for small businesses to grow so fast, so quick, and that it was a gift from God. So then I just kept making bread, and the word got around, and people felt connected to me, and I felt connected to them because I told them my story. And that's kind of how I started. Was I quit my job and I just went all in and gave everything to God, and He's taken it to where it's at now.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. That is so cool. I love how God worked in that for you. To go into the technical stuff of sourdough for a little bit, can you just give a background of the science of sourdough, why it's better than other forms of bread, just for anyone who's listening who's like, why is sourdough, why does it work the way that it does?
So all it is flour and water, and you mix it up. And there is this crazy chemical reaction. My 4-year-old loves science, so he thinks it's really cool that it basically bubbles over. It creates a natural yeast. And our gut is filled with good bacteria and sometimes not so good bacteria. And so that yeast puts more good bacteria into your body, which is really good with the digestion. And it can help with headaches and things like that, because regular bread has so many additives in it. And so whenever you're mixing the bread, you just add flour, water, and salt. And over time, that fermentation process builds it basically upwards, and then it creates your dough. It's not a surprise to me that sourdough has become so popular, because it seems to me that the trend over time is that people are wanting to go back to a more natural way than the quick and fast way.
Right.
And sourdough is definitely, something that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to put into. And it's not just like that quick gratification that you get from going to the store and buying just a loaf of regular bread.
Right, for sure. So just for funsies, does your starter have a name?
Faith.
What is it?
Faith.
Oh, I love it. That's so fun.
Yeah, so I named her Faith. And then I had done a sourdough class, and I had people coming up to me saying, "Is it okay if I rename this baby?" And I was like, absolutely. So people will send me what they named Jane Doe, and all of these funny names that they come up with their starter. And I think that's so cool.
That's so fun. So you do classes as well then? How often do you teach other people how to work with sourdough?
Yeah, I've taught about 3 different classes so far, 3 or 4. So basically people would sign up and I would walk them through the entire process. I created a whole guide on how to feed your starter, possible things that could come up or in the way for timing issues, because sometimes it can take the dough 6 hours to rise, but sometimes it can take 12. And so then you're kind of playing a weird game with your dough, wondering,
Right.
can I go to bed now, or do I need to stay up till 3 a.m. to shape my bread?
Right.
So I taught quite a few people. And it's really cool because they understand how much energy goes into it. I have some people who have taken my class say that they are so happy that they learned how to make it so they can make it for, their friends and their family too. And then I've had some people say, well, I'm just going to keep buying it from you because this is too hard.
Oh, that's so fun though. What kind of flour do you use? I know that there's different ones with higher, is it a higher protein content or what do you use?
So the science behind that is actually really cool. So a higher protein content will make your bread rise quicker. And so I get organic high gluten flour.
Okay.
And the reason why not everyone has to do organic, but the reason why I chose organic is because there is a gene mutation, and you can get tested for it by your saliva. It's called the MTHFR mutation. And that basically means that your body can't break down folic acid, which is a chemical compound that's in a lot of enriched and fortified foods. So if you think of gluten, you think of enriched breads or enriched pasta. And so it's not necessarily the bleaching that makes it have folic acid, but it's whenever they strip all of the ingredients like all of the good stuff out of the flour and then add it back in. And I dug
Okay.
deeper. And the reason why they do that is because flour, like when you get it out of the ground and basically start processing it, it takes a long time for it to dry out. And so they blast it with insane heat to dry it, and that strips it from all of its natural nutrients. And so
Gotcha.
they add the folic acid back in synthetically. My son has the MTHFR gene mutation.
Okay.
And so we noticed when he has things that are enriched or fortified, that he doesn't feel the best. And only about 50% of people have the mutation, but they don't realize it. And it can cause a lot of, like, if you ever have too much caffeine, and you kind of get that jittery feeling, that's kind of what it feels like for them. And
Okay.
so that's why I only use organic flour in my things,
Gotcha.
because he knows that he can trust that I will make something that he can try.
Yeah.
And he's like my little taste tester.
Oh, I love that. What a great job to have, though.
Yeah, it's really fun. I can do it from home, and
Yeah.
I have a 5-month-old, and I just wear him, and while
Yeah.
I'm shaping bread and stuff, it's not easy, but
Mhm.
it is worth it.
So how much time would you say you spend every day or like every week actually in the kitchen working with your starter, like working with the bread?
I don't know, a lot. I can
Yeah.
tell you that it's kind of like a split shift out of work. So I have a schedule down, and this is just for the bread. This doesn't include bagels and cookies that I also make. For just the bread, I'll feed my starter the night before. So feeding takes maybe like 5 minutes. You just
Yeah.
add flour and water. And once you've been doing it for so long, you don't need to scale it or measure it by grams or anything. You just add it in and you see the right consistency. And so I'll feed my starter before bed. And then the next day, around 1 or 2 in the afternoon, I'll mix my dough together, because I know that with the temperature of water that I use and my hydration process, which is basically like your flour to water ratio, how easy the dough is to work with, it'll be ready to shape after my son goes to bed. And shaping for me takes about 20 minutes for 10 loaves. And
Wow.
I have it worked between to where the Franklin Farmers Market's about to start up, and I am going to be mixing, shaping, and baking 120 loaves a week, which I did the math last night, and that's about 150 pounds of flour.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so much.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's time consuming, but not as time. I would much rather be doing this than doing something else, because I'm
Yeah.
working with my hands.
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned the ratio. Do you do a 1-to-1 or like what's worked best for you?
So what works best for me, and it's more of like a beginner ratio when you're mixing up your dough. So with your dough, you can have it as low as 60% hydration, which is basically the water to flour ratio. So I use less water in my bread and than other people do. I try to do a 100% ratio, which is like the same amount of flour as water. And that's just a sloppy mess. And I just don't have the time or the
Yeah.
energy to try and figure that out when the bread comes out pretty much the same. The only thing that's different is some breads have more airy textures, where I personally, and like a lot of my customers, prefer if their sandwich stays in and together than drooping out. Everybody
Yeah.
has their own preference.
Sure.
I stick to about a 65% hydration, because I feel like that's the easiest for me to work with.
Yeah.
And I also have a guaranteed result when I bake it.
For sure. For sure. So you do a lot of bulk baking. Do you have one oven, multiple ovens? How does that work for you?
Yeah. So when I first started my first market, I had only 30 loaves of sourdough for my market. And all I had was my little kitchen oven and 2 Dutch ovens, because you can either bake it in a Dutch oven, which is so easy, especially if you're first starting. You don't have to add steam to make it rise or anything. Some people open bake. So when I first started, I had 1 oven, 2 Dutch ovens. So it took me 15 hours to bake 30 loaves. So I pulled an all-nighter for the market. And then for Mother's Day that following year, my husband bought me a double oven. And we got it installed in our garage. And so now I can bake 15 loaves in 45 minutes.
Nice. That's so good.
Yeah, it makes me feel so much better about my time, especially with littles. It's and boys, it's much easier.
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to starting a micro bakery, because I guess in my mind, I think about all the technicalities of like serving food and you're doing this out of your home. Like, what was the process? Like, was it a hard process to kind of get all of that started?
Not really. So every state has their own, basically their cottage baker requirements. So it's things that you have to do to be able to sell from your home. In Indiana, it's pretty lenient, and it's about to get more lenient in July. Whenever I started it, you had to get your food handler certification, which costs $15. You have to do like a 2-hour class online and you take a test. And then once you pass your test, you get your certification. It's good for about, I think, a year or two. So I had to get that. But then you also have to check what you can and can't sell. So certain things, like when it comes to bread, you can sell just about everything, except you can't put cream cheese inside of your bread because it's a temperature controlled safety issue. But you have to check what you can and can't put in your breads, what you can and can't sell. Sourdough, there's basically no limitations aside from the cream cheese. And then you also, the most tricky part is the labeling guidelines. So right now we have to list all of our ingredients. We have to list the weight of the item. And then you also have to have on your front label your name, your address, your phone number. And then on the back, you have to write that it's produced and processed in a home bakery and that it's not inspected by the FDA or by the health department. So on there, like other states, you have to have home inspections. And so I got really lucky here in Indiana because you don't have to have home inspections or anything like that and create an extra level of stress. And then in July, they're changing it to where home bakers can put cream cheese inside of their breads. You don't have to have your food handler certification. And then in addition to being able to sell bread, you can also have pre-made meals available that you can sell to people as well.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
It's become way more lenient. And I plan to, after the farmer's market, pick up and start selling my great grandma's salads that she used to sell. I didn't even know she had a salad business from about the 1950s to the 1990s, where she sold like 80 pounds of potato salad that she all made in her kitchen. And she had a little shop in Franklin for about 10 years that she sold it out of. So it was really cool to hear like the family history and that, you know, the women in my family also were like homemakers in that way and wanting to serve the community.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Just a little like nostalgia and kind of that legacy is continuing. So that's so cool.
Sure.
So I guess you kind of answered this question already. As far as like how long it took you to become comfortable and confident with working with your sourdough, is probably maybe 2 or 3 months, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which apparently isn't super common. So if people do start and they don't get it right, it's okay. Like it's okay. And I still have mess ups sometimes. I mean, you always sometimes will have dough that didn't rise the right way, or it overproofed and you didn't expect it to. So you have to turn it into something else. So you kind of have to be ready to kind of flip directions, kind of on a dime. And but it's been a lot of fun and I'm really grateful for it.
That's so great. Now, with your starter, when you feed it, do you discard anything, or are you basically using a method where like you never really have to discard?
So when I first started, I ended up having like 5 1-gallon jars of sourdough starter because I didn't know what to do with it all until I started baking bigger. But what I will say to anyone that listens to this is that you don't ever have to discard if you don't want to. You can add it if you have a surplus of starter left over after you bake your bread and you don't want to feed all of that, you can put it into literally like any baked good. You can put it into pancake batter, or you can make crackers just with the starter on a pan with seasoning in your oven. But I don't discard anything. I basically use it all until there's maybe about 1/4 of a cup left in my jar, and then I feed it and use it again.
Gotcha. So because you're baking so much, how much starter do you have?
So right now I have some that's basically like I put it on a parchment paper and I let it dry out and I put it in a glass jar as a backup, because you never know what may happen. So you always want to make sure to have like a backup. But right now, I only have a 1 gallon jar that I
Okay.
will feed up until it's basically about to bubble over. I use that. And then because right now I'm only mixing about 30 loaves at a time, but it's pretty much daily at this point that I'm mixing
Okay.
30 loaves.
Yeah.
Um, and I have 3 refrigerators that I put my bread in. So that's how I'm able to
Wow.
keep up with it all.
You really do have a cottage bakery.
I've got one fridge in my like upstairs in our kitchen, one down here in our finished basement, and then one in our garage. So I have
Wow.
somewhere to always put my bread, which is nice.
Yeah, that's great. So I love your passion for this and also just how you choose to glorify God through this. Do you have any stories that stand out to you of like how your bread has blessed someone?
So at the farmers market last year, this woman named June, she came up
Mhm.
to my farm stand, um, and we were talking. We were just talking normally, and she said, "I love your name," and I said, "Oh, thank you so much." And she said, "My mother's coming. She's a little bit older, but I want her to meet you, and I want to try your bread." And I was like, "Okay, perfect." And so she brought her mom, and then she came back the next week, and they would start coming every week to the farmers market, whether they bought something or not, just to talk to
Mm.
me. And
Aw.
June ended up sharing with me that her mom had cancer
Mm.
and they weren't sure how long she was going to last. And I told her that I'd be praying for her. And so from then on, the rest of the farmers market is 16 weeks long. I would pray with June's mom right then and there, and that she would be comfortable, and um, that June would be okay. And then when right before I had my second son, June was texting me because she had my phone number and she had told me that her mother had passed. Uh,
Mm.
and that she was so grateful that she got to meet me, and that she saw Jesus in me, which is exactly the only mission that I have. Is it's not about me. This is not about me at all. This is about I want other people to see Jesus and feel connected to Jesus. And that relationship made me understand that even just getting out in front of people, and just being yourself. And if
Yeah.
the Lord shows himself the right way, that you pray that, Jesus is seen in you, that other people will want to open up their Bibles. And basically, that relationship made me so happy that I started this. And I would tell other people that come up to my market that if I could get just one person to open up their Bible after coming to my stand, then I know that I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Um, Kind of going backwards a little bit with going to the markets and everything, like is that a hard commitment, like a time commitment when you're devoting so many of your weekends to being at the markets? I know for me, I'm like that, my weekends are like sacred. It's so hard to give up, but like, how is that for you? Like when you're trying to balance being a mom and doing all the things and, it is a ministry for you. So does that kind of help you see it as less of a like obligation to go to the market and more of a ministry?
Yes. So in October of last year, my husband got a job opportunity, which was perfect timing because our second son was born in December. He got a job opportunity to primarily work at home. So he's home
Okay.
75% of the time. And so he's like able to help me so much more with our baby and our other little boy. And um, I will say, yes, it is tiring for the
Mm.
markets, but it's worth it because you're out in front of people. And I love to talk and I love to be around people. I am that person. Like if you want me to go out and do something, I'm gonna go and do it.
Yeah.
I love being out and about. And so it is exhausting. But I know that it's only from 8 to noon
Yeah.
and it's for 8 or 16 weeks. And that we use that, like me going to the markets, as an opportunity for my husband and our oldest son to have what they now call Bradley Daddy Days.
Oh,
So they get that one-on-one time to connect on Saturdays where it's just those two together. And so while mommy's out talking about Jesus and selling bread, Bradley and Daddy are having their own time together to kind of connect.
that's really cool. I love that. That's awesome. So final question. As you have like over these past few years now of like spending time with the Lord and kind of baking bread, like where has he met you in that and just taught you about himself? Like, I don't know if he's like, as you've pressed or just worked with shaping the dough, like if he's just taught you things about himself, but like if you can just talk about how God has met you there.
Yeah. So I remember falling on my knees and crying, being so grateful that I am able to do something like this because, again, he had met me at my lowest, at depression, where I could barely get myself out of bed in the morning. And he gave me something to work towards. And by keeping this business going, it was more reassurance to me of him saying, come on, get closer to me, learn more about me, and I will show you what I need to show you. And kindness is taken for granted, I feel like sometimes. But as my son and me say, is being cool is like being kind is cool, from Pete the Cat. And I have learned that people generally, you know, they have this desire. They have this desire to get to know something bigger than them. And he's just saved me so much from myself. And I'm grateful. So he's taught me patience. He's taught me kindness. He's taught me courage to go and do the hard things. He's taught me a lot about perseverance and getting through the tough to get to the good stuff. And a lot of the fruits of the Spirit is basically what he's been teaching me.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, it's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing your story and how something like baking bread can be used as a ministry, even just to share about Jesus. That's awesome.
I think
Thank you so much.
The parable of the mustard seed, how something so small, the more you feed it and the more you give it what it needs, the larger it will grow. And that's kind of how I view the sourdough business and just sourdough in general. Is you start off with this tiny starter and you feed it more of what it needs, and then it grows into something completely unexpected.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Alexis. And
thank you.
If you're watching or listening along and you want to follow along with Alexis on Instagram, you can follow Need for Christ Baking Co.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Home and the Maker podcast. And for other podcasts from Shine.fm, visit the Shine.fm podcast channel.